Welcome back to... I cannot tell you how much joy this moment gave me. You are a rugby player, Joe Linton, and you got spun by a 15-year-old. Hold that! What a time to be an Arsenal fan. We are still well over 2 weeks away from the start of the season, and your club, Arsenal, the club that did the Petr Cech summer, keeping our powder dry FC, have 6 confirmed signings in Zubimendi, Norgard, Kepa, Madueke, Mosquera and Gyokeres, with what sounds like more on the way. According to Transfermarkt, Arsenal are now only 10.9 million euros away from topping their record ever spend in one season, currently 235.1 million euros in 23-24 on total headline transfer fee commitments. Yes, I'm aware that's not how it works. Yes, I know what an installment is, but it's not just signings. New contracts are cooking, with Saliba confirming something is in the pipeline. Sales are being discussed. There's new coaching staff, new tactical tweaks. And so while I still think we need one more forward post-sales, hopefully an Eze, Leao or Rodrigo, no one can accuse the club of resting on their laurels. I made a video a few weeks ago called, Wait, are Arsenal serious? And it turns out we might be. Last Saturday, Victor Gyokeres was unveiled as Arsenal's new number 14, and chaos ensued. And was it just me, or while watching that club interview, did he kind of give Bond villain energy? The shadows, the eyes, he seems incredibly cold, and I like it. And a fascinating long read about the deal in The Athletic was released at exactly the same time as the announcement. At the beginning, they speak about anonymous club and player sources contributing and go into such specific detail that you can't help but feel, along with how exact the timing of the article was, very senior sources at Arsenal must have been across it or in some way involved. Does that mean they'll only share information they want us to hear? Well, maybe. But I think sometimes when people dismiss information like this because of that, they ignore something else. That's also interesting. They want us to hear the information. So why? And there's some big implications here that we'll get into. Some of the information was already well known or probably could have been guessed. We had confirmation Arteta and Berta were in agreement that number 9 was the priority position this summer. Confirmation that Šeško, Alvarez and Watkins were in the mix after an Arteta-backed pursuit of Watkins fell through in January. And again, the article heavily stressed Gyokeres' insatiable desire to make it happen, turning down his old boss at United, fighting the sporting president and his agent bypassing a 10% commission to make this deal work. I can't remember the last time a player fought like this to join our club. Whether it translates to the pitch or not remains to be seen, but it's massively endeared him to the fans, myself included. But here is where this gets interesting. The article revealed that Gyokeres didn't feature particularly prominently on recruitment lists while Edu was at the club. Gyokeres was profiled as a secondary tier player, one who could be complementary to Kai Havertz, but was not necessarily an upgrade over the German. His physical attributes and finishing prowess were not in doubt, but he did not look an obvious fit for Arsenal's game model under Arteta. However, Andrea Berta came in March and changed that. Berta was a long-standing admirer of the player and felt he could be the forward Arsenal need to help them end their current 5-year wait for silverware. Personal preferences were set to one side, as Arsenal, with the support of their owners, decided to explore the parameters of both deals. That way, their merits could be discussed and debated from an informed perspective. The article then goes on to reveal the nature of the negotiations from that point, with Leipzig and Šeško's camp taking quite an aggressive position, which didn't go down well, while Gyokeres' camp took more of a straightforward approach. Hand of Arsenal, very well connected to the deal, and surely Andrea Berta's uncle or something, said on X that Šeško's agent presented him like he was Messi to Berta, which again, didn't go down very well. You could say Elvis left the building. So bad, so niche. Arteta, though, still needed convincing. His number 1 choice was Isak, but that wasn't happening at the time. Pain. And it's been revealed that at the beginning of the summer, he had a preference for Šeško, who he saw as having the higher ceiling, even if he had some reservations about his immediate impact, as even those who shared that preference also did. Ultimately, however, the Spaniard came to agreeing on targeting Gyokeres. When weighing up the various criteria under consideration, manager and club were aligned that this was the best deal for Arsenal. So, why is this so significant? When Edu left last November, many people had a checklist of what they wanted from his replacement. Go back and watch this video from around that time, and you'll see I laid out 3 qualities I wanted for whoever the new sporting director was to be. The first was experience. The second was the pull to be involved in those big conversations around Wirtz's next contract or Musiala's next contract, for example. But third was that ability to be a big voice in the room and challenge Mikel. And that last criteria was always going to be the hardest to find and then the hardest to assess, considering we as fans have such little access to private conversations and insights. Mikel's fingerprints, quite rightly, are all over this club. It feels very much like his team, his club, and the owners clearly think he's the right guy, at least for now. While on paper, of course, Berta is above him, we all know power dynamics, symbols, visions, relationships are far more complicated than that. David Gill could technically fire Sir Alex Ferguson, but nobody would argue of the two who held more influence at the time. So to come in at this stage and challenge Mikel or change his mind on things was going to be hard for even the most experienced of sporting directors. We're not talking a small decision here about a physio program or something. Was there a bigger decision this summer than Arsenal's new number 9? It was the priority position, we now know. This is title and career-defining stuff. So to challenge Mikel here and change his mind, you need big ones. And it seems Berta has big ones. Pause. I think successful challenge in any field of life ultimately comes down to chemistry. And although I think you can develop it and you can work on it, you kind of have it or you don't. Think about in your life. You must know there are people instinctually you feel, I can challenge them. And some people you go, I can't with them. We may rationalize it as, well, they have more experience or they know more about a certain topic. Yeah, but I'm always conscious in life of too much rationalization, too much logic, because that's often hiding a deeper emotional truth. To challenge someone and to be challenged, there needs to be unconscious conditions. You have to feel safe, you have to trust yourself, you have to be informed on your topic, and you have to respect the other person, yes, as a professional, but ultimately as a human, to receive and give that challenge healthily. And trust me, that's not easy in a high-octane masculine domain. So, the fact that Andrea Berta, it sounds like, changed Mikel's mind on something as big as this, or at least made him see something another way when the numbers were going the way they were going, is a big deal. And it's a really good sign of a healthy partnership and healthy power dynamics. You could say rubbish comes down to money. Nope, Šeško's camp came back to talk with lower demands. And this was Arteta's preference, who we chased for 18 months. And we still stuck with Gyokeres. And if you think the insiders at Arsenal's first knowledge about the Isak move was the same as us with the Fabrizio Romano tweet, you're in cuckoo land. Maybe you could see it as Berta ignoring his recruitment team. Okay, but I like it. Stamp your authority. Show us who you are. You want him? Okay, show me why. I think we need to be very careful here on 2 fronts. First, this isn't Arteta versus Berta and Berta won. And second, we are still very young in this relationship. But what I think it is signs of a burgeoning partnership that could be brilliant. Too many chefs in anything is a bad thing, but also just to have one person basically calling all the shots and holding all the power at a club, even if they're as talented and smart as Mikel is, everyone has blind spots. This is just my gut instinct. I don't know this. My gut tells me Jorginho and Tomiyasu moving on probably wasn't Mikel's first pick. However, it's probably the right call. Another article from The Independent mentioned that Berta is a bit more old school, a bit more eye test, relationships driven than Arteta. To be reductive, do I want my whole club run on vibes? No. But in theory, to have 2 main decision makers from slightly different schools of thought who have shown they can align is a good thing. Ultimately, let the best ideas win. I never bought this idea of Mikel as a dictator. What he is, and has always been, is highly intelligent, very charismatic, very good at communicating, and very good at his job. So naturally, he'll rise to the top and lead well. We saw it even as a player. But if we are to fault him, maybe he is a bit risk averse. Maybe he is a bit too methodical, a bit too long term. Could Edu counter that? I always got the sense that Edu was more of a complement, someone to support Mikel. But now, and even though it's only one thing, it is a big thing, we appear to have found someone who might be able to challenge him. And listen to Arteta talk about Berta in any presser. This isn't media trained, yes, we enjoy working with Mr. Berta. He loves him. And maybe Mr. Berta is teaching us all something else here as well. In the past, I wonder if we've been guilty of getting attached to players. Certainly I have. But there are many different ways to skin a cat. As I say, I don't like doing old guy bad, new guy good analysis. It's not worth doing it. There's benefits and drawbacks to every approach. It's about what Arsenal need right now. And I think we have, at times, with this long-termist approach, been burned and left with squad holes simply because we're too intent on certain targets. I remember to this day from 2020, there was this Fabrizio Romano video where he says, Mikel is in love with our, mainly because I found it a humorous turn of phrase. But we couldn't get that done in summer 2020, so we just didn't get a creative midfielder, which we desperately needed. Sure, we found Smith Rowe, but the beginning of that season was horrific. That run, man, horrible. Then in 2022, we can't get Mudryk, who would have been an £80 million expense. In fairness, we do pivot to Trossard, who has been good, but that's clearly not a direct alternate spending-wise. And that already came after failing to get Rafinha in the summer before. We felt we had a need for a top winger, but we're left without one for 6 months at the start of that season. Edu literally told us we didn't want Sterling on loan last summer at the start of the window, but we clearly needed a forward. There was a need, a gap for a first-team forward. We just didn't fulfill all summer, and we left it too late. Who did we not do from January 2023 onwards? Who were we waiting for or working on in that time where we only signed Havertz, who started in the midfield, and Trossard? In that Miguel Delaney article, it mentions how Arteta has balked at certain transfer targets because he's not sure how they'll understand game model things like pressing triggers the way that Kai Havertz does. That Sean Dyche meme has never been more apt. Joking aside, the analytical part of the game has to lead, but the fact is, leaving ourselves short because we can't get the perfect player is a far bigger sin than it is to, okay, maybe not sign the perfect level-raising player whose ceiling will only rise at the right price, at the right age, and the right context with the right blah, 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 blah. The truth is, in my view, leaving ourselves short is what's cost us. Sometimes talking about certain things a lot, whether it's central progression or improving our turnovers or shot volume or whatever it might be, gives the impression that I think it's the most important thing. No, it's a factor, but we had a centre mid up front and nearly got to a Champions League final. We are not a million miles away. So even a small upgrade, who is there, could be the difference. But the exciting part is pairing a analytical, data-driven, highly motivated, fixated coach with a more relaxed, good negotiator, high-volume guy in Berta sounds like a good partnership. And I found Arteta's comments on Gyokeres on Arsenal.com when he signed really quite revealing, and hope to hear more in the coming days and weeks. He said, the consistency he has shown in his performances and availability have been outstanding, and his goal contributions speak for themselves. Victor has so many qualities. He is a quick and powerful presence up front, with incredible goal-scoring numbers at club and international level. He brings a clinical edge with a high conversion rate of chances into goals, with his intelligent movement in the box, making him a constant threat. These things aren't made up on the fly, which is why I think they're worth looking at. Almost the first thing he says, availability. Big check. And I didn't realise this was something I should have factored in before. Victor Gyokeres has missed 5 games of football in his entire career. In fairness, he doesn't have crazy minutes in his legs despite being 27, but that is a huge pro. Is he perfect? You know my opinion. But is he going to be available? Yes. And what's the bigger factor for Arsenal right now? Mikel also said he's a quick and powerful presence. I remember in the video on Gyokeres, I showed this graph and asked how confident we were about recreating it. And I stand by that. But as I said, and as was confirmed in the articles, not by me, don't shout at me, I do think Gyokeres is seen, at least at first, as a complement or competition as opposed to a direct replacement for Havertz. This indicates to me we might attack differently with Gyokeres on the pitch. In fact, I'm sure we will, which is a big plus. And at that fee, that's much more like complement money to me. And finally, Mikel highlighted his intelligent movement and the fact he's a constant threat. Obviously, don't take my football opinions over Mikel's. But I personally haven't seen that box threat yet. Certainly not in isolation without other players creating chaos around him. But if he can thrive in that aspect, especially when we have certain players growing in stature who are real ball carriers, chaos players like Dauman and Waneri and Madueke and potentially an Eze, then great. There's some really interesting offsides versus runs numbers circulating that show Gyokeres well. So maybe he means that. And all of that tells me something. Arteta, I think, is more willing to adapt next season. If Mikel has agreed based on the parameters, as we saw earlier, the money, what we're looking for, the immediate impact, and so on, there is no way a man as smart as Mikel Arteta puts Gyokeres into some of the dynamics we saw last season. The slow, consistent, final third, squeezing stuff. It's just not where Gyokeres thrives. People might say Mikel never changes tactically. It's total rubbish. From 3 at the back to flying fullbacks to fullbacks in the midfield to true 10s to double pivots to false 9s to inside forwards. We've seen it all under Mikel. But what he doesn't do however, I think is changed too much within a season. So now I'm excited to see how that changes. And last season, when you look at some of the benches, changing games was one of our biggest challenges. We couldn't do it. So maybe that's how Mikel evolves the team next season. Finally, I kind of love Berta's willingness to stamp his authority here. He's shown himself to be a great negotiator who, once you've had your chance, that's it. And as I said at the beginning, this article is club informed, i.e. it's likely someone very high up at Arsenal wants this information out there, whether it is actually Berta or not. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because his usage of the media is so calculated. Regardless, consciously or not, he is now going to be seen as the guy who wanted Gyokeres and got it done. Going against the advice of an entire recruitment team, which were, quote, almost unanimous, that Gyokeres was further down the list. If this bangs, how good does that look? If it doesn't work, well, he'll get the flag. But I like the risk. What we now have is a pair of top football operators. Someone described as one of the top coaches in Europe, alongside what is clearly a new, riskier sporting director than what we've seen. We've longed for a return to the days of David Dein and Arsene Wenger as a pairing. So maybe there's a modern version of that partnership developing here. To complete the window, attention must now turn to sales. And as I said earlier, I do think we need one more forward for me once we've got people out the door. The latest things I'm hearing is we are looking to do that. But after quite a positive, hopeful video, I want to close with a bit of a counterpoint and a bit of a word of warning. Something I'm looking at the new partnership that I've praised today in Berta and Arteta and saying, show me something. Without rehashing my 22 players registered in 24-25 unacceptable thing again, George, my co-host on the Canon podcast, made a point to me the other day, and I think it's a good one that I want to repeat here. Mosquera has replaced Tomiyasu. Madueke has replaced Sterling. Zubimendi has replaced Partey. Norgard has replaced Jorginho. Kepa has replaced Neto. We've done a lot of deals, but in terms of squad function, we're probably only one up from last season in terms of true depth. Now, true depth should also take into account Tomiyasu not being fit for the whole of last year. Maybe the impact of Miles and Ethan is greater this year. Dalman looks ready to me, but that's another story. But you could make a decent argument that Gyokeres is the only number we've added. Everyone else was a replacement, number-wise. Do we then need to be careful with sales? We're looking at Zinchenko and Reece and Vieira and saying, yeah, get them out the door, clean the house. Let's be careful. What is the benefit of some of those guys on lower wages sticking around as a spare squad player here, considering how short we were? I hate playing the we're one injury away from games, but we are in a few situations. With Jesus possibly returning, maybe the improved availability squad-wise helps us, but you never know, do you? Sounds like some long-term issues have been ironed out with the likes of Ben White, and with the way Ødegaard is locking his ankle again, let's see. But you're always going to worry about something, so I want to worry about how we're going to keep everyone happy, not about how we're going to fill the bench with quality. Let's see how our flourishing partnership deals with it. I want to be clear. I'm not here to bash Edu. He did some great work at Arsenal and will be fondly remembered. It feels more to me like the project came to a point where it needed fresh energy. And it seems like we may have found Mikel Arteta his match. Thanks so much for watching. If you like The Different Knock, you can support us on Patreon and get ad-free early access to each video for just £3 a month. Or for one-time support, you can buy us a coffee. Links are in the description.